Hello everyone, this is Tutorial. This video is going to be a continuation of the story of what took place after the March for Life rally in Washington, D.C. on January 18th, 2019. So as I mentioned in my last video, there was a group of high school kids from Covington Catholic High School waiting for a bus to pick them up, standing outside in the cold as they had already done for hours. And this January has been colder on average than the last few winter seasons. I have actually done quite a bit of research on the polar vortex today. I'll be uploading a presentation on how the polar vortex works. It's a complicated phenomenon that has a lot to do with how the convection currents of the wind work and the polar the rising of warm air from the polar regions and the storm it creates. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's weak. Years when it's weak, the cold air travels southward, and so that's what we get. So that is a polar vortex. Actually, should probably more accurately be called a polar cyclone, but anyway, also occurs in the Antarctic. We'll talk about that in another video. That's a brief introduction. So these kids, everyone who attended the March for Life rally, and there were tens of thousands, the attendance at this rally really put the Women's March to shame. The attendance at the Women's March to shame. And it is really strange how all these feminist marches are about the complete ignoring and callousness towards the not only traditional but evolutionary role of women, of females, to be protectors for the unborn, and how it's really tragically ironic how feminists who claim, although everyone knows they have no consistency, but claim to stand for strong women completely disregard females' evolutionary role. That could be a whole another presentation of itself. Well, several. It's not like this is unknown, but so at some point, this group of Black Hebrew Israelites, they call themselves, they are in fact a black nationalist group, a hate group of really all other demographics, appeared and began shouting racial slurs at the white teenagers. So you had adults harassing children, barely one step away from outright threatening teenagers just because they were white kids and wearing Make America Great Again hats, which is a perfectly acceptable and patriotic thing for them to have been doing. I don't know if you've been living under a rock the past several years, but America, like the rest of the West, is falling apart, and Make America Great Again, which was Donald Trump's campaign slogan, catchphrase, is what tens of millions of Americans actually want to do. We want our free and stable country back, and we are willing to work very hard to restore its stability over generations if we must. And it is hate groups like the Black Hebrew Israelites, Antifa, and leftist teachers and professors that are in the way of any hope for a peaceful future. The Black Hebrew Israelites, who I will be from now on referring to by the abbreviation BHIs, since the whole name is quite a mouthful, and I have quite a lot to say, so let's shorten it even by a little bit. This black nationalist, black supremacist group really telling the Native American activists there that they had lost their land because they took to worshiping buffalo and eagles. Okay, first of all, that is every bit as much a stereotype as anything that's ever been said about blacks. The Native Americans were never one group of people. There were multiple clans, multiple tribes all across the Americas, multiple faiths, multiple cultures and practices, and yes, there are religious ceremonies involving eagle feathers, but the worship of animals, especially powerful animals that in the environment, apex predators and large, either useful or aggressive herbivores, as spiritual beings or guides or totems. Not unique to Native Americans, many prehistoric religions revolved around animal spirits. And the wild bovids of North America are not buffalo. They are bison. Yes, there is a difference. It's a little beside the point, but there is a difference. In any case, look at what happened here. The BHIs were saying that the Native Americans deserved to lose their land. So not a lot of tolerance from the blacks, actually none. They're just as racist, just as supremacist as any supremacist group has ever been. And then the BHIs turned to the Catholic high school kids and called them such names as a bunch of future school shooters, and I think it was their teacher they called a child molester, completely without any credibility, just hollering whatever they could think of. In fact, the most terrible, unholy names they could think of at the Covington Catholic high school group, and what teachers were there. Now, if you're listening to this and you have a shred of decency within you, I need you to listen very carefully here. These are not names, I don't want to call them accusations, because these were coming from people who don't know these kids or the teacher at all, know nothing about them except that they're white, and maybe they knew they were Catholic, I don't know. These are not things you can just start shouting at people. I know those who do so are the ones who are not going to care about what I have to say, but saying things like that, they called them incest babies, crackers. Crackers is probably the least offensive thing, although that is a racial slur, as is honkies. I don't know if anyone uses honkies anymore. Sounds like a clown's name, but whatever. It's been used against whites. Future school shooters. Where do they get the very idea that that's something you can just say in public? These are things that have some serious consequences for everyone. But the left has gone into the profession of destroying lives just to get more leftists into power and to remove their opposition, make them disappear by any means necessary. And they've only multiplied their evil efforts into doing this since President Trump was legitimately elected into the presidency in 2016. Thank God. And the mainstream media, who ran with a story about Trump telling Mueller to... They did this at about the same time as they completely intentionally misrepresented the lie about the Covington Catholic kids provoking the confrontation. That was a lie. And they also lied in saying that Mueller had told that Trump had told Mueller to lie to the investigation about the Trump campaign, and told him to lie concerning what investigations were going on. Mueller had to come out and correct the story. Trump never told him to lie. The man who has been investigating the Trump campaign since 2016, said that it's not true. He was never told a lie. And the media, just like the Russia collusion, Russian working for the Russian story about Trump, they just ran with without evidence. They also ran with this before they knew the truth at all, just like they ran the story about the Covington Catholic kids being the racists at this confrontation was not true, but they ran with it anyway. They wanted it to be true because of the ratings it would get them, and also because of a much larger agenda. We'll get to that in a bit. They said that the Covington High kids were harassing the Black Hebrew Israelites even before, of course, the details and facts surrounding what took place were known, which means they just glanced at and cherry-picked a few pictures of clips and made a story up. Much of the mainstream media has just been making shit up for the past, well, actually for the past several decades. My younger brother and I got through watching the first half of the documentary Hoaxed, put together by Mike Cernovich and a number of other people. We will probably watch the second half when we're with our dad. Actually, we'll probably watch the whole thing over. It's a very good documentary. Go watch it if you can on Vimeo. It's totally worth subscribing to Vimeo, building an account just to watch that documentary, and you can watch other good presentations as well. The mainstream media since the 1960s, and a lot of this is tied with the infiltration of the leftists into politics and mainstream media since the hippie baby boomer generation of the 1960s, and that is a long story in and of itself. But so a short version is after World War II, after communism had been pushed back in Europe and in East Asia, what happened is a lot of the communists that had been pushed out of their countries began to infiltrate the West, infiltrate Europe and America. But they couldn't grab power right away because the war to push them back had just happened. People were still on high alert. So they went about, the leftists and communists who joined forces with the Muslims, with the project of Islamic expansionism, because Muslims, let's be honest here, they want a worldwide caliphate. They've said this before. A lot of these groups, a lot of these people, as a sort of loose association, but definitely working together, joined forces to infiltrate politics, academia, mainstream media into Europe and America, and slowly built up their power and influence through the decades until our time, the time we're living in now, where they've infiltrated to the highest levels of power just about everywhere. And this is why they were so pissed off at the legitimate election of Donald Trump, because Trump was a barrier to their grabbing power. If either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton had gotten the presidency, their ascendancy would have been sealed, and it would have been even harder than it is now. In fact, pretty much almost impossible than compared to it. It's incredibly difficult now because they silence people in the universities. In the media, they try to absolutely destroy your life. In politics, they try to destroy your life. I mean, look what they did to people like James Damore, Brett Kavanaugh, Alex Jones. What they tried to do to Jordan Peterson, it just didn't work. Kavanaugh did get his Supreme Court seat, but his family was just put through hell. And they're trying to do this to Trump. This is why Trump really should have just stuck with General Flynn. General Flynn was a very good defender of Trump, and Republicans really cannot afford to be splintered right now, but they are. And aside from Trump, a lot of them are also cowards. And there was a lot of cowardice coming from the Covington Catholic school itself in how they completely betrayed the students, the kids, when they got back. The school as well did not wait for the facts, did not wait to hear the kid's story. And the school came out and condemned the kids. Again, we have got to be a lot more careful in believing news stories just outright. We know there's a lot of fake news out there. We know there's a lot of misrepresentation. We can't be doing this. At one time, journalists lived up to the expectation and the role of finding out the facts, finding out the truth. Now they're completely agenda-driven, take down the West, agenda-driven, and go after religion, go after I know Ben Shapiro talks about this, their attack on any religious institution. Now, the Covington Catholic School did turn their back on these boys, completely unjustly, but nevertheless, there is also, at the same time, a massive assault on all non-Islamic religions, which is weird because Islam is by far the worst religion on earth, the most oppressive, the most intolerant, the most torturing religions. Why are all these why is there so much collusion with Islam? Well, it has a lot to do with, just like communism, it's good at taking over other nations. It just absolutely sucks at running them. But there is a massive assault on white Western Christians, and it's got to stop. And these kids, confronted by extreme hate from the Black Hebrew Israelites, the Black nationalists, and then this Native American, well, really con man more than anything, Nathan Phillips, who claims to have been a Vietnam veteran, wasn't, just happened to live at the time, and I think was involved in some minor ways with the military, has been known to be a troublemaker, has a history of looking for confrontations like this and claiming victimhood. Instead of confronting the black nationalist, black supremacist adults, went and got up in these white teenagers, well, children really, children's faces, and started chanting and beating his drum. And when someone comes up to you like that, chanting and beating the drum, I mean, what are you supposed to think of it? I mean, that's weird. And the kids started kind of, I think they asked their chaperone if they could start singing and, sort of dancing to their school song just to lighten the mood, to try to calm tensions, which is exercising an amazingly impressive amount of restraint. And they did some tomahawk chops. So what? So what? They were trying to get in the mood. They were trying to not cause trouble. They were doing everything they could to calm everyone down. But of course, as we know, no one else had any intention of calming down. This was a trap to initiate conflict set for them, and they did not fall into the trap. It's just the media and everyone afterwards made a complete falsehood and went after them. So some people on Twitter even calling them for the kids to be physically harmed, hunted down, death threats, punched in the face. These are kids. What the hell are you doing? I thought we were all told back when we were kids not to judge situations, and especially people, before you knew the truth. Well, I guess that lesson was only ever expected of white kids. And hey, they actually followed that, but no one else ever did. And I mean, some people who just read the story online or in newspapers also jumped to conclusions. I've read some responses on Quora as to inquiries as, do you think they should have handled this the way they did? Both the kids and the media. This has been asked in a number of ways. And there's some people who are saying, I feel bad that I jumped to conclusions. Well, I mean, that's a pretty good lesson not to. The abuse of the Covington high school kids by the Black Hebrew Israelites continued for a very long time, and this Nathan Phillips is a complete disgrace to his ancestors. There's so much Native American pride that the remnants of tribes are supposed to have. Although I've heard from numerous credible sources that most of the younger generations being born now that still have a significant percentage of Native American heritage. A lot of people in North America have a tiny bit. I myself have a tiny bit. And there was that whole funny story about the fact checking of Elizabeth Warren's claim that she was part Native American. Turns out she is like less Native American DNA than most of the people in North America, which would be hilarious, except she's been riding on that claim and making her career and name out of that claim ever since college, her college years, maybe even before. And so she's used a lie to get by through affirmative action programs and minority favoring programs. It's just it's shameful. It's shameful. I once read a book, just a couple years ago actually, written by one of the first single men to adopt a child by himself. His name was, let's see if I remember this right. Name was, well, the book is called The Broken Cord. The name is on the tip of my tongue. It is about this Native American man, history and I think culture professor, or he was one for a time, who adopted a kid, adopted a Native American kid who had very severe fetal alcohol syndrome. This is what happens when a baby is born whose mother was an alcoholic, and this was a very severe case. And he talked in the book a lot about that this is a serious problem with Native American children today, and Native American communities as a whole. Is that they have a genetic susceptibility to alcohol, and so even more than other demographics, their fetuses, their infants, their children are even more easily affected by the mother drinking alcohol than other demographics, and what that can do to a child. It can totally destroy their brain any chance they have to live a normal life. And that was a very tragic story. I wish we could all learn from the past not to just keep playing the victim card, not to get into this victim mentality, which has really been the doom of stable Black culture as well. And the broken families, all the children on some kind of drug or another. It's taken down the white communities as well. They just lasted a little bit longer. It's tragic. And the most tragic thing of all, I think, is that it's actually not that hard to reverse this. But there's going to have to come a generation that says, you know what, we're not going to fall to this time. We're going to rebuild the stable family. And any demographic could do this. The white community could do this. The Native American community could do this. The Black community could do this. The Hispanic community could do this. Actually, really the only demographic community that is sticking together is the East Asian community, although they have troubles of their own. Both East Asian communities in Western countries and in their own countries. Just look at the issues of karoshi in Japan. They're and also the military training camps that China is now putting its children through. I still have to read the article of what the Chinese millennials were forced to go through to suffer their childhood. Childhoods are being ripped apart by just this accepted victim mentality of groups and destroyed families all over the place. In fact, that is a commonality that all demographics share. Just families being ripped apart. If we're going to unite over anything, one thing we could unite on is rebuilding the stable family and improving childhoods. I'd be more than willing to make that the mission of the next 100 years, and I fear that it's been ripped away before we even had a chance to know we had to dedicate decades, and eventually generations, reviving on that, to restoring trust in gender relations, restoring trust in marriage, restoring trust in single families. And these are values that the Catholic Church and Catholic schools will teach. Christianity will teach. Judaism teaches it as well. Judaism has a few too many rules, the kosher and other things for my taste. And these Black Hebrew Israelites, they're not real Jews. They're black supremacists. They have, just like families who say they're Jewish, just have the get-togethers and the meals together, but outside of that don't really practice their traditions. And these BHIs, they're even worse, because they use the victimhood mentality to attack other groups. The excusing of this narrative that whites victimized everyone, which, I mean, it's not true. I mean, my ancestors come from several different origins, a few places in Europe. Let's see, I have Italian, I think Italian, Irish, German, English, and a little bit of Native American ancestry. I think take this with a grain of salt, because I haven't really gone through verifying this, but tracing back the stories that I do know about my family's origins, I'd actually be very interested in tracking down the entire history. I know a little bit. I know I have some ancestors who were actually loyalists to the British during the American Revolution. They actually had to go hide out in eastern caves when the rebellion won. I have other ancestors that fought in the rebellion, and I have, judging from the region that my family came from over the last several generations, I believe the most likely, and again, I haven't gone through verifying this. Right now, I just have too much to work on, but there is a lesson attached to this that I will say, and then after that I'll cut off for tonight, because I've been going on for a while. I will do a second part to this video to wrap up other lessons, but judging from which region, which the kind of New England to the Midwest part of the United States that my family has, that different ancestors leading directly to my family have come from all over North America. I believe the Native American side would have come from from some of the Iroquois tribes. I don't know for sure, but looking at the regions as to where we come from, that would make the most sense. But the lesson to be taken is, look. French. I have French ancestors as well, and so some of my European ancestors came to America a couple centuries ago as indentured servants, which were basically, they weren't exactly slaves, but they were people who had been sold into servitude, much like slaves, came across the Atlantic, came to America as servants, and eventually they could earn enough money to buy their freedom, to try to land their roots on the new continent, and eventually they did. I don't know exactly which generation did, or which generation married into, or I guess Iroquois would have married into my family at some point. But look, every single demographic, every single population, every single race, religion, all people throughout history lived extraordinary difficult lives. And I believe that the best we can do to learn from that is to look at each culture, look at each way of life, figure out what aspects work and what didn't. You know, the great thing about the white Christian culture is that it's establishing of the stable family that treats their kids well, that lives by the Ten Commandments, that emphasizes delayed gratification, things like no sexual relations before marriage, although admittedly that can be tough, but at least the very strong attempt to. And the fact that you build a family for birthing and raising children, and treating those children well, treating those children not as merchandise, but as investments for the future, for your family, being very protective of them. This is why I actually really liked the Legend of the Five Rings story that was released by the relaunched version, Fantasy Flight Games. One of the core stories is about the Dragon Clan, which is the clan I like to play in Legend of the Five Rings. It was called, that's right, the Dragon Clan story, The Rising Wave. In The Rising Wave, this this regiment, I don't think they're on a military quest, but these samurai are trying to are seeking to investigate the source of the trouble that is plaguing their land. The Dragon Clan live in the very high mountains of Rokugan, and they are experiencing, at the time this story is written, and this came out within the last couple of years, they are experiencing a very severe shortage in children being born. Now, one of the things that they do to answer this, although it's not although even this is not really a sufficient solution, and they're lamenting this throughout the story, is they will take children from peasant families, because Rokugan is based off of feudal Japan, and so you have a very seriously enforced caste system hierarchy. Anyway, but they will take children with some magical elemental ability. I mean, this is a Dungeons and Dragons style game, but affinity for arcane ability, and adopt them as samurai, as train them. Although even this isn't really enough to save their dwindling population. So the main character of this short story is leading his men through the blinding blizzard mountains to seek out a source, kind of the never-ending story-esque. Seek a cure for what's ailing the empire. Seek out what's going on, and he almost in the blinding snow, he almost tramples this, I think, 12-year-old girl. He almost tramples a child traveling through the mountains, and his horse is injured. He gets off the horse, and he's so terrified, so shaken, that he might have hurt one of the children in the clan because there are so few children around, and he actually has to sacrifice his horse because because its injury is beyond recovery. But in the very story, it says he would have sacrificed something like a dozen or 100 or some high number of prize horses just to save the life of one human child, because that is the direness of the situation we're in. And this ties into my confusion with just how widely accepted as abortion is now. My question is, where is that level of concern and treasuring of children that we should still have? I'm sure there are prehistoric times. In fact, this is probably how we had to value children as humans in prehistoric times, because infant and child mortality was so through the roof, being that we are kind of half predator, half prey animal in the wild. And hey, the Paleo Indians, the Paleo Native Americans, I don't care for political correctness, but actually, if you want to read a really good book series about the Paleo Native Americans, the People of the series is really good, but it's filled with slavery and rape and brutality, and these things are not new to humans. They've been going on ever since humans existed. I mean, they're in great apes. I mean, well, gorillas are relatively peaceful. Chimpanzees are absolutely brutal. Humans have a very weird contrast to them. We are capable of great brutality and evil, but we are also, if we put our minds to it, if we put our hearts in it, we are capable of compassion and care for our young that no other animal on earth has the ability, has the capability, has the resources, has the sheer time span of care to give to their children. And I wonder why we aren't all trying to go in that direction. If we were trying to put the stability of the families in which we raise our children first, if we were trying to put care and concern for their futures first, and restoring constructive guidance for them, we could go a long way towards solving many of the troubles and suffering in the world. That opportunity was completely abandoned, passed by in this confrontation between the Covington Catholic high school children and these vicious hate groups, and the completely cowardly Nathan Phillips. I mean, for someone who served, who had some military service, he wasn't a Vietnam vet, but he had some role in the military. How he acted was disgraceful. And it seems like all of these opportunities to restore our actual concern for each other just get passed up. So our media and our governments can push these vile narratives that I gotta tell you, at some point, we've got to just say, you know what, we're sick and tired of this. We're not buying it this time. We have to wait for the facts to come. We have to wait for reason and evidence, and maybe then, after the truth is found, we can make our decision and strategize for building for us and for our children the best future possible. That will be all for tonight. I will be returning with another follow-up video soon. This is Kestrel Raptorial. Till then.